Welcome to the show, everybody. Open mic with Mike, free for all Friday. Ask me anything. The number is 1-800-484-3801, 1-800-484-3801. I'll put it on the screen there. Also, if y'all want to put your live chat questions in there, go ahead and do so now. Let me put that number up there. Okay. Looking through the chat here. How many of y'all caught the roundtable yesterday on Timothy Gordon's channel? It was myself, Eric Sammons, and a couple other guys discussing the motu proprio. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. I see one here now about it. Will you go to round 2 of the roundtable from Gordon's channel on RNT? If there's a round 2, sure. Patrick says, Mike, you killed it on Gordon's channel. Well, thank you. 90% of what I wanted to say, I couldn't get in there. So I felt like very little was done. I actually wanted to make some comments about some of the things, but I'll probably do that in a separate show. I wanted to address the comments there made about Vatican II Dignitatis Humanae versus the Syllabus of Errors, a very fundamental blunder there. Wanted to address the issue of claiming that Pope Francis taught the death penalty is immoral versus inadmissible. And when I say that that's not the same thing, I was told that it means the same thing. So I guess words don't have meaning now. I guess words just mean whatever. Kind of odd for a Catholic to take that position, but okay. Let's see here. Looking through the chat. Thank you, River, for that super chat. Daniel says, Eric looks like he's really hurt by the crisis. I understand that. I get it. I have been there. I've been hurt as well. I know what he's going through emotionally, but his position that he's taking lends itself to Eastern Orthodoxy. And I've already been down that road and seen the mistake of the position that he's maintaining. And I've worked through those problems and I've dealt with the emotional issues. And, I hope that he does the same. I know he intends well. He's a good guy. He intends well, and he doesn't mean to undermine the faith by any means. But I would say that his position still objectively, some of the things that he was saying, Hillman and, of course, the SSPX guy, their arguments are the same arguments that the Eastern Orthodox use. When you're using the Orthodox arguments, against the Catholic Church, but you're using them to make your position as a Catholic, there's a problem when you have to borrow from their paradigm. But yeah, a whole lot that I could say, and I will be saying in future shows. But let me take this call. Caller, you're live with Reason and Theology. What's your name and your question?
Hey, Michael. This is Grant Michael.
Hey.
Big fan. Called in, I think, your last call in. I wanted to say I saw the roundtable discussion.
Yeah.
And I thought you did an excellent job.
Thank you.
I felt that it got I don't know if I should say heated, but I felt it was a good debate, and I felt like you had the most clear evidence to back up your claims.
Yeah.
It seemed like I was a bit worried to see actually some of the responses, but I'm glad you've been holding your ground with regards to the Novus Ordo Mass and Vatican II and those things. And I just appreciated you defending the magisterium and the faith on that last night.
Yeah, thanks for that, and I appreciate you watching the show. And the position I take is a pretty qualified one, and I don't fit into most people's categories. So they often confuse me for whatever their worst fear is. Whatever their worst nightmare is, they confuse me for it. Some people think I'm liberal. Some people think that I'm Orthodox. Some people think that I'm a radical traditional. I mean, whatever their worst fear is, that's what they assume that I am, because they hear something from me and they don't hear the rest of what I have to say. And they jump the gun. And I think some of that was happening yesterday. But I was very disturbed by, although I was expecting it, by some of the claims that were made. I think some of the claims were slanderous against our church. And that's what makes me very upset, frankly. When I hear slander against Christ, his bride, the church, that's when we have a problem. And so I have a problem with some of the things that were said yesterday. Again, I know the intentions aren't to slander the church. I know their intentions are good. But at the end of the day,
Right.
I don't care about your intentions if you are objectively still maintaining something that is slanderous to the church. And I think that the claim that Vatican II objectively was misleading people and destructive and is harming people, and stuff like that, or that the Novus Ordo itself, I was getting the impression that the Novus Ordo itself, objectively, as it's been officially promulgated, not abuses, is sinful or problematic or something to that effect. I wish I could have had more of an opportunity to cross-examine and ask, okay, well, what are you saying here? Are you saying that the Novus Ordo is sinful? What are you saying here? Are you saying that Vatican II has errors in it? What exactly are you saying? I would like to have asked for further clarification, but I couldn't get to it. So, but from what I heard,
I just want to, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, from what I heard, I still don't see any way to put a spin on it that was a positive one. To me, it sounded slanderous.
No, I thought you made clear arguments that were supported. And I guess my last point on it is something that disturbed me, and I think it seemed like it disturbed you, at least from what I could see when I was watching, was how there was a distinction made by some of the other commentators about the Vatican II church, calling it the Vatican II church as if it's not the true church of Christ. And I think you brought that up yourself in the round table somewhat, but I found that to be a disturbing point in a trend made by some of the others.
I got him to clarify that. Well, he's not saying that, he's not saying it's not the true church, but you're using language that lends itself to that. At the very least, stop using that kind of rhetoric. Stop talking about the Vatican II church as if the church has substantially changed. Stop talking along those lines. We can talk about the post-conciliar church in some context. I understand. We can talk about the post-conciliar church in reference to the Council of Nicaea, before and after the Council of Nicaea. There's some utility to that language, but in the context in which most people are using it, it's in a way that puts down the post-conciliar church, and that's, to me, problematic language. Let's not put it in those terms. Let's just talk about the Church of Christ, the Bride of Christ. And then whatever criticisms that you have to offer, make sure you're saying it in reference to the Bride of Christ. I want you to say it in that context. Let's hear your criticisms. And I think people are a little bit more guarded when they offer criticisms when they're talking about the Bride of Christ, right? So that was kind of my point there about it. They had a lot of an opportunity to unpack it. So, but what you said though,
absolutely,
is and believe me, I had a whole lot more sources that I wanted to go over, but I felt like I was trying to bring them back to the issues objectively. Here's what the magisterium says. Right. But all I was hearing back was, I wasn't hearing, well, this document says this, the church teaches this. All I was hearing was rhetoric. And the one reference that I can recall was Gamber. Yeah. Even he was taken way out of context, and I had to show in context. You just took Gamber way out of context. Go and read the end of the chapter. You didn't do due diligence here. You didn't even look it up in the context.
Yeah, I noticed that. It seemed to me, and I guess one other final note was, I think the reason I personally, as a fan or a viewer of your show, have been attracted to it is seeing you source from actual material from the magisterium. I felt when I watched that distinctly like Michael seems to be arguing from, a founded, logical standpoint, but I felt like the others were acting a lot out of emotion, although I don't think, not to speak poorly of them, but I don't think they would perhaps admit to that. But
I know they wouldn't, but look, I've been there. I've been where they are. I've done the exact same things. I've said the same things. I've used the same arguments that they've used. I know what they're going through. So I sympathize to that extent. At the same time, I'm the one over here playing cleanup with all of the mess that they're causing, because they're using arguments that lends itself to Eastern Orthodoxy. I watch those people then go to Orthodoxy. They then come back and tell me about how they left to Orthodoxy because of content like this. And then I have to go and do apologetics to those Eastern Orthodox. So I'm over here left holding the bag and cleaning up the mess that they're inadvertently and unintentionally causing. And that's why I said, look, you can say all this stuff all you want, but I actually have to go and engage the Orthodox. So you can't really use that argument in that context. And if you can't use it in that context, it's probably not a good argument.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate it. And thanks for taking my call, and we're excited to see the Globe and the ladder as always. Just throw in a little shout out for that. But thanks a lot, Michael. We appreciate you.
Thanks, man. Take care. All right.
Bye-bye.
I think I got another one on the line here. Caller, you're live with Reason and Theology. What's your name and question?
Yes. My name is Austin. A fellow Louisianian here. I actually have family up north where you live. So, and I have a question about communion in the hand. You did a video a while back, explaining how the early church practiced communion in the hand for the first millennium. I think it was a great video. I just have some things that I've found, and I want to get your thoughts on it. You might be aware of it already. Pope Sixtus the First in 115 AD, saying that the sacred vessels are to be handled by no other than those who are consecrated to the Lord. Pope Saint Eutychian in 275, where he forbade the faithful from taking the sacred host in their hand. And you have the Council of Saragossa, who excommunicated anyone who dared to receive in their hand. I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are on how to view this in a coherent way.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of those references are spurious. That's part of the problem. I'll go through those particular ones later on tonight, and I'll do a show covering those particular ones if you would like. I need to go and look at them, but I recall some of those, and they tend to be spurious. Some of them tend to be out of context, where it's not taking into account other customs in the area. But I would note, however, that you do have an ecumenical council, the Sixth Ecumenical Council itself, that notes communion in the hand is to be done only, and no utensils, nothing else is to be used. Now, the quote that you gave to me, I think you said it was 1125. Is that right?
So the first one was from 115 AD.
115 AD. Which pope was this?
Pope Sixtus the First.
I don't even think that's right. No, that doesn't sound right to me at all offhand. Pope Sixtus the First in 115 AD.
Yeah, this is from LatinCatholic.com. I'm sure you're aware of that website. I don't know, but
and those are the ones that I've noticed tend to be spurious. Let's see. Yeah, Sixtus is around that time, but that does not sound right at all. What's the reference? What's the actual source for Pope Sixtus the First? What's the document?
Well, it does not give.
It does not give it, does it? That's the problem. And you can come across a million of these websites that will say this pope and that pope said this and that and this and that. And then you actually say, okay, well, where's the primary source? And you can't find one.
Right.
That's a problem. A lot of these tend to be spurious. Whereas I can give you real, authentic quotes, like the Sixth Ecumenical Council. I can give you real, authentic scholars who would back me up as well, and they will give you the primary sources too. I mentioned Jungmann in that video that you're referencing. He goes over a lot of the primary texts. He gives it to you in Latin and gives you the references, and you can go and look them up. So he'll actually provide the sources. And he notes, in the West, communion in the hand was normative, with exceptions here and there, but communion in the hand was normative until the 878, somewhere around there, 9th century, late 9th century. and even gives you the counsel
Um,
that you start to see the shift with. And so from that point on, you start to see the discipline. That doesn't mean you can't find a reference here and there prior to the 9th century, but those tended to be exceptions and abuses rather than actual normative practice. So I can give you actual literal bona fide references that you can go check out for yourself. Those websites don't generally can't do that. So that's my problem with them.
yeah, yeah, sure. And I also mentioned the Council of Saragossa. How I would respond to that is, this is
It's
a
it's
local
really
council.
hard for me
This
to
may have been,
understand. Are you speaking directly into the phone or speakerphone or something? It's really hard for me to hear.
um, okay, is okay. Is this better?
Slightly, but we'll get through it. Go ahead.
Okay, okay. Yeah. So I mentioned the Council of Saragossa and how it communicates people who receive in the hand.
Mhm.
How I would respond to that is, okay, this is just a local council. This may have been done in this area,
Yeah.
but we couldn't open this world,
Well, look,
throughout the entire church.
you're in the right direction because look, even in the, like I said, the 7th century, so with the Sixth Ecumenical Council, you have there a canon in the East, because that's primarily where the canons were applying in the East. You have a canon that is telling them not to use any kind of sacred vessels in the reception of communion, that it's to be in the hand. So that tells you that there were some who were doing it, right? So there's no doubt, and Jungmann will note it, there are occasions here and there where people may have been doing on the tongue or using some kind of sacred vessel, but those tended to be abuses. The normative practice was on the hand. In rare cases, women in very remote locations for very short periods of time in history used a cloth on their hand, women only. And the Eucharist was placed on the cloth. Some people hear about that and they think that, oh, well, communion in the hand was always done on the hand on the cloth, and that's not the case. Jungmann corrects that. So I'd recommend maybe checking him out. And if you would like, I can go through and do a more thorough video than the one that I did. That one I did with with a little bit less prep than maybe a future show that I could do. I could probably put a little bit more prep work into it and do something a little bit more thoroughly engaging the sources that you're discussing. So
yeah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hey, I'm glad you called. Thanks for calling, man.
Yes, sir.
All right, take care. Call 1-800-484-3801. I have just a little bit longer because we have a show coming up in 20 minutes. Roundtable on the Motu Proprio here at Reason and Theology with James Lakutis. One of the fans requested that we get him on for that. So, let's see. Why do you treat the first millennium canons on communion in the hand differently from those on divorce and remarriage? Well, first of all, I don't even accept the canon as normative for the West because, like I said, that canon was a little bit more applicable in the East, but it just so happens that the practice in the West was the same at the time. So I'm not even necessarily saying that, oh, you must accept that canon. No, because I also think that the Catholic Church in the West legitimately reformed that practice and by administering communion on the tongue. And I'm fine with that practice. And I think that's more preferable in today's context to do communion on the tongue. So you're completely getting a category error wrong here. Now, canons on divorce and remarriage, have you looked into those? Have you really done some research here? The sad thing is when I became Eastern Orthodox, I was really looking for some sources pretty hard for divorce and remarriage to defend the church's position, the Eastern Orthodox Church position. In a lot of cases, well, I say in some cases, the canons are spurious, the sources are spurious. In authentic cases, guess what? They're referring to men only are allowed to divorce and remarry, not women. That should tell you that there's something going on there. That doesn't sound like an apostolic doctrine if we're starting to differentiate between genders here. It sounds like something going on from society. Start to look into the context. You'll find out that there's a lot of problems here. There's not a whole lot of precedent for it in the first millennium, even in the East. Now, I'm not saying it didn't exist in the East. Yes, it did. I'm just saying there's not as much, so there aren't as many sources for it as you might think. And then the West did not approve of it. If you look at the West and its reaction and the Pope's reaction, it was to reject it. The only kind of divorce and remarriage they were okay with was if your spouse died, you can now get remarried. And even that was problematic for some. They were saying, no, even if your spouse died, you can't get remarried. But some were saying, okay, well, you can get remarried. They're talking in the context of spouses who died. But actual spouses that are still living and getting remarried, those are harder sources to find. And so you might want to look further into that. Annulment really isn't different than divorce the way Roman Catholics use it. Yeah, that's absolutely nonsense. Stop buying that. Stop buying that rhetoric. Even with any abuses that might be going on, that's not the case. I don't buy that at all. Can Palimism be reconciled with absolute divine simplicity? Of course it can. First of all, I don't accept your terms, absolute divine simplicity. I know what you mean by that. I don't accept your term because I know where that's coming from. But I know the gist of what you're asking me. The Western understanding of simplicity, can that be reconciled with Palimism? Yes, it can. Should it be reconciled is the real question. Just because something can be reconciled doesn't mean something is true. So I would say that the answer is yes, but that doesn't settle the issue. Caller, you're live with Reason and Theology. What's your name and question?
This is Jacob.
Hey, Jacob.
And so my question is about the place for the form Eucharistic on the hand. It seems to me from what I've heard, like I haven't read Jungmann or anything like this, but in the early church, it was often done on the right hand only, and that there is theological significance attached to not touching the Eucharist with the left hand. And so I'm perhaps what Jungmann would say on this, and any like theological comments on the differences between these two practices.
Are you talking about whenever you make your hand a throne like Cyril's talking about, or at least pseudo Cyril? Is that what you're referring to?
Not specifically to that quote. I don't have a specific quote. Because this is just I've learned of this from listening to people like Flanders, right? Timothy Flanders. But yeah, so that's just my understanding that it was done the right hand.
That may have been the case in some cases, but I don't recall that being normative as if that's an established precedent. I'd like to see evidence for it. I would also note that there are some cases where saints talk about they take the precious blood and they put it on their eyes and their lips and things like that. So I would ask, okay, well, how does this square with the idea that you can't touch the Eucharistic species when the blood is being smeared on your face and things like that?
So I guess to get to the root of my question, I guess, is do you see that there being like a significant difference between these two, considering like the biblical significance of the right hand compared to the left hand?
The only biblical reference that I can think that might have been the significance behind it, and it's 100% speculative on my part at this moment, unless you can establish it, is obviously you have the sheep and the goat, right? So you have the sheep on the right, the goats on the left. So those who go into union with God at the second coming are on his right, and those who are on the left go to perdition. That's the only reference I could think of.
I was recently at a Byzantine wedding, and the priest, he was talking about the significance of the right hand and why, for the Byzantine tradition, they would never put a ring on the left hand. I think he brought up something from Abraham regarding Genesis and Abraham or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but his emphasis being on like the right hand is hand of covenant. The left hand, well, he said something cross about the left hand, so I won't repeat that.
Right. Yeah, I know where you're going with that one. I'd like to see some sources for it. I mean, I'm not opposed to that being, a practice or maybe a meaning that some attributed to it in the first millennium. I would just like to see some sources for it. But as you know, things were not always very uniform when it comes to significance. Or even the particular form, right? I mean, there could have been different ways in which one would have received on the hand, and I gave a couple different examples. Women at some places and sometimes received on the cloth on their hand. Cyril, or at least pseudo Cyril, whether or not it can be actually attributed to him is another thing, but it's around that time period. Cyril of Jerusalem talks about putting your hand on top of the other hand and making a throne. And there's other references as well. If you look at, again, the Six Councils reference, it doesn't give you a whole lot of details on it. So I'm sure things varied, but again, on the whole, the practice still tended to be on the hand. That's at least we can establish that. But as far as the significance of the right versus the left, I'd like to see some sources on it.
So kind of as a follow-up then, what do you think of this kind of reactionary argument that picking up the Eucharist with your left hand is self-communing?
What do I think of somebody today receiving communion on the left hand?
No, not so much receiving on the left hand, but picking up. So the argument goes along the lines of, well, communion on the hand, on the right hand, putting your mouth down to the sacred host, sacred species, would not be self-communing. But the method in which we do it today, picking it up, is self-communing, and it's an abomination, is basically what they would say.
Yeah, I remember we had a guy on from the Assyrian Church of the East who made that argument, and I think that it's a distinction without a difference. You're self-communicating either way. I'm sorry. However you get it there, you're the one putting it there. I'm sorry, you're self-communicating either way. It just sounded a little silly to me. Now, as far as if there's a custom of doing it that way, hey, I want to respect the custom, but I wouldn't argue for the custom on that basis. I would just argue for the custom on the basis of this is how we've done things for a long time, and we want to be respectful to our customs. I would argue for it along those lines.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw that show, but when I heard that part, I just thought this is a distinction without the difference.
Well, thank you so much, Michael.
Hey, I appreciate you calling in. If you can send me some sources, by the way, on what you were talking about, I'd like to see it. Email it to me at Reason at Theology.
Yeah, I'll see what I can find.
Okay. All right. Take care. God bless.
You too. Bye.
Let me take this one super chat and then get ready for the other show here in 8 minutes. Why did some saints, such as Augustine, approve of abstaining in marriage, vowing celibacy in marriage, when the Apostle Paul commanded otherwise? This is what some people have speculated about Augustine. Augustine had a really rough past, even sexually. He had a rough past with sins, especially the sexual sins. And by the way, Grant, thank you for that super chat. I see yours. And Dreadnought, thank you for your super chat. Augustine had a rough past with that particular sin. So when he became a Catholic, I think he got a little too rigid. To say that, you should abstain during marriage. First, I would like to see an actual source for that. But it does sound a lot like what I've heard from Augustine. So I would like to see a source on it, but what you're saying does ring true from him. I think he was wrong in this matter. You can see that the church did not accept some things that Augustine taught. His understanding of the fate of infants, the church did not adopt it, for example. So there were some aspects to Augustine that we don't necessarily have to agree with. I think that might be one of them, if you can substantiate that. But I do know other things that he said that were along those lines that I don't agree with. I don't think that there's any thing sinful inherently with a husband and a wife engaging in the marital act. But Augustine seems to think that passion is always at play there, and that it's always sinful. And I think that goes a little too far. But I know Catholics are free to disagree here, though. At least I think so, from what I've seen. All right. Well, again, thank you for the super chat. And sorry that I couldn't get to more here, but we'll continue to do these on Fridays. We'll probably have a little bit more time next Friday. But again, I appreciate y'all watching. Thank you for the comments and questions there and the call-ins and super chats. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. And also check us out, patreon.com/Reason and Theology. That way, if you would like to support us, you can check us out there and also get access to extra content, which I'll be adding this weekend. All right. See y'all in just a little bit. God bless.